Hey everyone, my name is Liz Brock, and I am the co host of the Far More podcast with my husband Jason, but he is not here today. So I am going to be talking to you about how to communicate with your spouse. So Jason and I have been doing this podcast we've been doing it since August of last year. So that's quite a few months. And the number one feedback that we get, well, actually, I'm going to give you number two first. The number two out of the top 5 feedbacks we get is you and your husband really seem to enjoy each other. Like they can tell that we have good rapport, we have a good dynamic. But number one, and we get this so much, y'all, so much, is I wish that my spouse and I talked to each other and communicated with each other the way you two do. And so in talking about this with Jason, I thought, you know what? I need to do a solo podcast again. I need to do a solo episode and just talk to y'all about maybe how to reconnect with your spouse or just how to get the communication going, because whether you've been married for 5, 10, 15, 40 years, communication is key. Communication is number one, because in the top 5 reasons of why marriages fall apart, fail to thrive, it's lack of communication or miscommunication. And so I just want to give you what I believe are some effective strategies to communicate with your spouse. I think that we have lost just the art of having fun and conversation. So let's just dive right in, okay? Key number 1 in effective communication, or just communicating with your spouse, get to know your spouse all over again. So if you're listening to this episode, I am generally assuming that you have been married for a little while. Jason and I have been married for, y'all, I'm so bad at math. I think it's been 13 years, almost 13 years. Yes, almost 13 years. There is still so much for us to learn about each other that we're still finding new things out. Not every single day, because again, we have been married for a while now, but we learn something new often. So I want you to close your eyes, unless you're driving. Please don't close your eyes if you're driving. I want you to think back about to when you first met your spouse, the person that you're married to right now. Think about the first day you met them. What did you do? You asked them questions about themselves. You asked them what they liked. You asked them what they didn't like. What kind of foods do you eat? What kind of pets do you have? Where did you grow up? You asked them all these get to know you questions. And y'all, even if you've been married 5, 10, 15, 25, 40 years, even if you've been married that long, I am willing to bet that there is still something left to learn about your spouse. And so ask them questions about themselves. And then if they don't return the favor, just maybe give them, depending on how long you've been married, give them a little nudge and say, don't you think maybe you want to ask me that question about myself? Like, it's okay to pull it out of them every now and then, but get to know your spouse again. Ask them about their hobbies. Like, ask them, find interest in what they have interests in. Don't just be so self-consumed, because listen, I understand life can get busy. If you have kids, if you have multiple kids, Jason and I have 3 children. All three are involved in a different activity. And so we're constantly on the go, high-fiving, but you have to make time to ask each other questions and to stay engaged. You have to stay engaged with one another, because this is the person that you have committed to spend the rest of your life with. And what you don't want to happen is you don't want, when your kids are in their growing up years and they're still in your house, you don't want to become so disconnected from your spouse that when your kids fly out of the nest, you are with a stranger. Don't let your spouse become a stranger. Stay connected to them. Keep learning about each other. And so I think that's my number one, my very number one key is get to know your spouse all over again. Continue to get to know your spouse every single day. So I just thought I was going to move on to number 2, but I just thought of a couple of things that you can ask them. And one of these I got from Jason. He's just such a smart man. And Jason, if you're listening, that was for you. Ask your spouse, and y'all, you're going to be really surprised at the answer you might receive. Ask them one of these questions. What in life is really exciting you right now? Is there something in your life that excites you right now? So that's number 1. Another question you can ask them is there something in your life that is making you nervous or making you anxious? And I'm hoping that an environment, like a safe environment, has been created in your marriage so that your spouse feels comfortable and vulnerable enough to open up and to share. But you just never know what could come of asking those 2 questions. Now, here's your bonus question, and you're going to get bonus points for this one. Bonus points if you ask your spouse, what is one small thing I can do for you to make your life easier right now? All right, key number 2, and I think this one's going to be a little difficult for some people. This one isn't really a challenge for me because I am not a natural debater, but listen to understand, not to give a rebuttal. I'm giggling because I am thinking of my husband, Jason. I know you're listening to this and I love you so much. But in the earlier years of our marriage, and y'all, I'm pretty sure he's okay with me sharing this. In the earlier years of our marriage, I do feel like Jason would listen to me only to know when I was done talking so that he could give a rebuttal or so that he could start a debate or so that he could be heard. Now, he is not like that anymore. He is a very good listener, very active listener, but it has taken work. It has taken work. The goal should be to try and understand the other person. The goal should not be to just listen until they're done so that you can give your opinion and so that you can be heard. Because when you are active in trying to listen to and understand your spouse, to get clarity and to dig deeper, you continue the conversation in a way that is going to help facilitate resolution instead of just causing this bickering and this back and forth and this he said, she said, you did, I did. It's you, not me type of situation. And so I just want to encourage you to be an active participant in listening, but not just so that you get your turn, because there is a time and a place, obviously, for you to offer your argument or to defend yourself. But generally speaking, make sure that you try to understand where your spouse is coming from, because isn't that the same respect that you want when you are being listened to as well? So try to give what you want to get back, which is to be heard and to give respect to the other person. All right, key number 3. And y'all, I think this is one that a lot of us have to work on. I know it's one that I need to work on. I think Jason would admit that it's one that he needs to work on as well. But it's to create a safe environment for your spouse to be vulnerable and honest with you. If you're always casting judgment and criticizing your spouse when they open up to you and they share their feelings because they think it is a safe space, they're going to shut down. We have to not let our hurt feelings get in the way of having a conversation. Case in point, most of my life, so I am 45. On a previous episode, I told y'all I was 46, and Jason was like, hey girl, you're not 46, you're only 45. I digress. For most of my life, I have been a pretty sensitive person. I would get offended easily. I've shared before that words of affirmation is my love language. So anything opposite of that, so any kind of criticism, whether it's constructive or it's delivered poorly, it doesn't even matter. I would get offended, and I would think that that person was actually saying the words, "You're not good enough. You aren't blank enough. You aren't this enough." I wouldn't actually take the advice, take the criticism. I wouldn't take that in to let it spur on becoming better. I would always take it so negatively. And when Jason and I got married, you know, he loves to have hard conversations. We've talked about this before on the podcast. This is not new information. He loves to have deep conversations. He doesn't do small chit chat. I mean, he does for the sake of me, because he has learned how to effectively communicate with his wife. But I would basically shut him down when he would try to have a hard conversation with me, because I was not creating a safe space. I was not creating a safe environment, because I was letting my hurt feelings get in the way from having a constructive conversation. And I would like to think that if he were here with me, he would say that I have gotten a lot better. I am still sensitive, but not nearly as much. I have developed a much thicker skin because Jason has learned. That's another thing. To the person who wants to have the hard conversations, I would urge you to explore different ways of having them, because it's not a one size fits all. I think Jason has learned me pretty well, and he's learned how to approach me about hard things, and he has learned when to approach me, because that's important too. Timing is everything. But I also know, and this is, oh, y'all, lean in and listen to this one. I also know how much he loves me. And I know that he is not bringing up this hard topic to hurt me. I know that it's only because he wants me to be better. He wants me to be the best version that God has created me to be. Or I know that it's because he wants to improve our marriage. He just wants to make things better. He is all about forward progress and not staying static and not staying where we are. Because if we're not moving forward, we aren't actually sitting still. We're regressing. We're moving backwards. And so I think what I would encourage you to do is create the safe space for your spouse to approach you, or if you are the one who wants to approach your spouse, learn how to do it in a loving way. Make sure they know that you love them and that this hard conversation isn't to beat them down or to criticize them or to judge them. It's to make y'all better and to push y'all forward. Create a safe space, y'all. I know it's hard, but we have to do it. Now, on the flip side of that, key number 4 is make it fun. Jason Brock, I want you to lean in and listen to this one. It always doesn't have to be a deep conversation. We don't always have to talk about goals and objectives and the big thing that we're going to do next or finances. Sometimes it's going to sound really cheesy, y'all, but tell each other jokes. Or if you're really bad at telling jokes, watch a Netflix comedy special. I highly recommend Nate Bargatze. He is not a sponsor of this podcast, but he is so funny and he's so relatable. He's so dry. His wit is so dry. Side note, I'm actually going to see him with Jason. He's coming to town, I think in May. And so I'm really excited. That's like my Mother's Day present. I digress again. Watch a comedy special together, because more likely than not, that comedian is going to say something that the two of you can relate to. And when you are relating to each other, guess what that creates? It creates a bonding experience. And laughing releases dopamine. I mean, it's a win, win, win all around. So, key takeaway number 4, make it fun. It doesn't always have to be serious. Do something fun together and then talk about it. Like, relive the experience together. Talk about what you loved about the thing. Ask your spouse what they loved about the thing. And then share the memories and the laughs together because, laughing really is the best medicine, y'all. All right, key takeaway. Key number 5. And I cannot stress this enough. Put the phones away and turn off all the screens. Now, first and foremost, what you have to do is you have to read the room first, because if you walk it, okay, case in point, we record this in Jason's office. And so I know that if he is standing, I'm pointing over here because this is where his computer is. I know if he is standing at his computer, he's working on something. I know that that's not the time to come and have a conversation with him. I would be literally setting myself and us up for failure if I approached him. So if your husband is watching the big game, whatever it is, the Super Bowl or whichever team he follows, if he's watching the big game, please read the room. If it's not an emergency, I am going to ask you to not approach him right then because he's doing something that he enjoys. Husbands, you don't get off the hook. If she's in the middle of a really good book, she's washing the dishes, she's putting the kids to bed, please don't try to have a conversation with her. Read the room. Timing is everything. I said it a couple of keys ago. Timing is everything. So make sure you approach them. Or you know what you can do? You can say, hey, Jason, I know that you're at the computer working on something, but hey, I'd really love for us to just sit down and hang out and have some time together. Or if it is a serious conversation, let your spouse know, like, hey, there's this thing that we really need to talk about. When can you do it? I would like to do it tonight. Can we set aside some time? More than likely, they're going to be like, oh yeah, let me look and see what I have going on. And you can get a schedule down. It's okay to plan hangout time. Don't get mad if your spouse is like, hey, I'm in the middle of something. Can we do this later? Be understanding. Be respectful of their time. Hopefully they're being respectful of your time as well. So make sure you read the room and make sure you ask your spouse like, hey, when is a good time for us to sit down and have a conversation? Okay, I feel like I've been a little formal because I've been like key number 1, key number 2, key number 3. So let's just make it a little bit more friendly as we wrap up. I want everyone to have fun in their marriage. Again, number 1 feedback we get, how in the world? Well, number 1, people are like, how in the world do y'all have so much to talk about? And I don't know, y'all. I guess it's because we are consistently working on ourselves. Jason is a major consumer of information. And so there is, y'all, there's really never a lack of content for us to talk about. And then I am so immersed in all things social media because of this podcast and because of Facebook. And y'all, I really do love social media. I know a lot of people hate it, but I mean, it's a love-hate thing, but I love it more than I hate it. But I consume so much content every single day that we just always have stuff to talk about. But you know what else it is? We really like each other. And I think we both really like to get to know one another. So, that was one of the points I made was get to know your spouse all over again. Like, I love getting to know all of these different facets of Jason. I'm so intrigued by how he processes information, and I think he would say the same about me. I don't know if he would use the word intrigued, but I think sometimes he gets confused by how I process information. But y'all, that just makes our marriage even richer because we are not alike. We are so opposite, but we really enjoy each other. We like to have fun, but we also are open. We are open to new ways of thinking. We are open to constructive feedback. We are open to hearing the other person's opinions. But I think one of the keys there is to just always be respectful. Like, don't demean your spouse if you disagree with them, because you're going to disagree. It's part of life. You are two different people who have come together, who have made the commitment to spend the rest of your lives together. You're not always going to agree on things. Jason and I don't know what y'all think about us, but we don't agree. We don't always agree. But I feel like we have figured out how to disagree with each other in a very understanding and respectful manner. So I think another thing is just, this is a tough one, I think, for a lot of people. When you're having conversations with your spouse, try your best to avoid blame and criticism. Try to avoid phrases like, well, it's your fault that we ... or you just always blah, 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 or you never blah, 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 blah. Have a conversation about it. Don't just start hurling accusations and spitting out criticism, because you know what that's going to do? What does that do when somebody does that to you? Do you lean into it, or does it shut you down? And I can guarantee if you answered, I lean into it, you probably don't lean into it in a very respectful way. It typically brings up aggression and defensiveness. And I don't think anybody wins when you start casting blame and casting criticism. So if we can try to avoid that, let's try to avoid that. And last but not least, practice active listening. So this is something that Jason and I feel like Jason and I both had to kind of work on this. And this kind of ties into the whole having your phone with you as well. Eye contact is really big for me. So when Jason is looking me in my eyeballs when I am talking, I love it. And I know that might sound silly. And really, it's not just Jason, it's anybody. If I am having a conversation with somebody and they are locked in on what I'm saying and they are looking me in my face, they're not looking around, they're not distracted, they're not checking their phone every single time it dings, I feel so special. I feel respected. I feel important. I feel like they are listening to me. And so I want to encourage you that if you're like, oh gosh, I do that. I think I look at my phone every time it dings, or I get so distracted when somebody's talking and there's something going on behind them. Put yourself in a position, like flip it around. Trade places with that person. And y'all, I'm going to tell you something that I do at restaurants now. Now that I really know Jason really, really well, when we go to a restaurant, I will purposely sit on the side of the booth or the side of the table where I am the one facing all of the busyness, because I can block that all out. Jason has a harder time blocking out the background. And part of that is just his protective nature, his observant nature. He always got his head on a swivel. He wants to know what is going around all the time. But on the flip side of that, it's a distraction for him sometimes when we're having a conversation. And so know your audience too. Like if your spouse is like Jason and he, head on a swivel, kind of gets distracted by a movement in the distance, flip it around, but practice active listening. Let your partner know, let your spouse know, I am listening to you. I hear you. I want to be in this conversation with you. Okay, y'all, there are your key takeaways to effective communication. And I'm going to put a whole bunch of things in the show notes. I'm not going to list them here, but just make sure you look in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube, look in the video description, because I'm going to have a bunch of information down there that's going to help you. Now listen, if you are not following us on socials, This is a little special disclaimer. Since Jason wasn't here today, what we've decided to do is he is going to do what's called a stitch. If you don't know what that is, it's on TikTok. Just Google what is a stitch on TikTok. And so any of the social clips that I create, he is going to stitch them, and it's going to be a lot of fun because you're going to see his feedback. Not in real time, but you're going to see his feedback on what I say. And y'all, there's no telling. There's no telling how he's going to respond to my key takeaways or to the stories I told about him. So make sure you are following us on all the socials: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We are at Far More Podcast on all the socials. Jason will be back next week. And until then, have a fantastic day.